Welcome back, everybody. This is Fantasy Football 201, a advice show for fantasy football. We are previewing every single team this offseason. In this video, we are now moving to the New York Jets. So any team alphabetically listed before New York, I have a video on already, so you can check that out on my channel. I also make a lot of other content on my channel, so if you're interested in any of that, please check out the description below and check out my channel. Consider like, commenting, or subscribing. So we will now go to the Jets. So before I get to the Jets real quick, I want to highlight a trivia question from the last video. So I'm doing a trivia question before every single video. So in the last video, the commenter who guessed this correctly, his name is Emil Craig. The Giants won the Super Bowl in the 1990-1991 season. He also commented the 86-87 Super Bowl as well, so I'm assuming you're a Giants fan. But thank you for commenting. You got that correct. And then follow-up question, what should I know as a starter in fantasy football? So I like fantasy football for me personally because I think it's a fun way to interact with friends. Stay in touch with the league in terms of certain players. And the other thing I find really fun is just the strategy that goes into kind of just gaming the economics of player stocks going up and down, trying to put together a team of players that'll be most successful. I think that's really interesting to predict. I actually don't really ever bet money on sports, so to me, money is not really an aspect for me in fantasy football. It's just more the fun of kind of playing the puzzle, I guess. But it's a good way to interact with friends, and it's a good way to kind of stay current on the league too. So that's why I would definitely advocate getting involved. So if you've got any other comments or questions, feel free to check out the channel. So we'll do a trivia today on the New York Jets. So the trivia question is, the Jets drafted Zach Wilson this year with the number 2 overall draft pick. They've had the number 2 pick multiple times in their career, but they've actually only had the number 1 pick once in their franchise history in 1996. So who was the player that they selected in 1996, number 1 overall in that draft? He's a very familiar name, but comment below if you know who I'm referring to. And if you get that right, ask a fantasy football question and I will answer it on the next video. So yeah, as I mentioned in my last video, planning to do a mailbag every week once we get into the season with questions. So comment below. Don't have a lot of subscribers, so take advantage of it while you can. So we will now get to New York Jets. So real quickly, highlighting their schedule. The New York Jets begin this season at Carolina, which is a pretty good matchup for them. So potential to start out the season well. They have some up and down matchups throughout the season. They go to the New England Patriots and Denver Broncos the next 2 weeks. So could be a little bit of decreased production there. But then they play Tennessee and Atlanta in weeks 4 and 5, so potential for some good matchups there. The best stretch, in my opinion, for the New York Jets is going to be later in the season. So they have week 12, they play the Houston Texans, which is not projected to be a good defense. Then they play the Philadelphia Eagles, not projected to be a good defense. They've got a challenging matchup against the Dolphins sprinkled in there, but then they go to week 16 in the fantasy football playoffs versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that's probably their best stretch, in my opinion, between week 12 to week 16. They have a tough close to the fantasy football playoffs with Tampa Bay and Buffalo, but they don't ever really have a great stretch of games, but I think that they do have some good matchups that they could be worthy stream candidates from time to time. So now we'll go to the quarterback position. And the quarterback for the New York Jets, I mentioned him earlier, is Zach Wilson, drafted number 2 this year out of BYU. Zach Wilson is coming off an incredible college season in which he threw for, I believe, 33 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Yeah, that's correct. He threw for 3,699 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, completed 73.4% of his passes. He also ran for 254 yards and 10 touchdowns. So Zach Wilson really had a breakout year last year. That was kind of the year that everybody kind of really were very hyped up about this guy and felt that he could be an excellent franchise quarterback with his play style similar to Patrick Mahomes. And I do think that there is potential that he could replicate that because he is a young prospect. He's going to have a lot of opportunity with this Jets team. My concern, though, is that the sample size at which he's shown this success was pretty much just out of one season. And the other thing to take away from last season is that we weren't playing in the typical college football landscape. It was mostly affected by COVID, not a lot of fans. How is he going to respond when he goes to a pro stadium like he goes to Gillette Stadium and he's got to play the Patriots and he's got to face that crowd? The things are questions to me. Or when he goes to the Buffalo, that's going to be another rowdy crowd. So he's got his fair share of questions about him as well. So I'm a little cautious about him personally as a fantasy starter this year. I think he could be good value to you. He's probably not going to get drafted. And I think he's actually a very good stream candidate for week 1 going up against Carolina. But he doesn't have the sample size like some of these guys like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields have in terms of college experience that I would prefer guys like them when they go right into the NFL. So that's my concern with Zach Wilson. And I think depending on how he plays, that's really going to dictate a lot of how this offense plays because they have some potential guys that could play well this season, but I could also see their production being significantly inhibited if Zach Wilson doesn't play well. And I think a lot of that probably not going to be his fault because he's a rookie. Doesn't really have the best of offensive lines either, but have a hard time seeing him being consistent. But that being said, before we move to skill position players, the Jets project to be one of the worst teams in the league, but you have to pay attention as a fantasy football owner to the bad teams because that's where you can get some guys on waivers that can really be of significant value to you. A lot of these Jets running backs and receivers aren't very well known and are not being taken pretty well or pretty high in the draft, but their production is going to have to come from somewhere. And some of these players will have some decent value for you that you can get on waivers and or late in the draft even. So really pay attention to these teams as their season goes along as well because they could have some sleepers that come out of nowhere and could really be great fantasy assets for you. So that being said, we'll move to the running back position. And the Jets signed Tevin Coleman from the San Francisco 49ers. He's currently listed as their starter. Questions if he will actually maintain that position. So Tevin Coleman looked to be one of the top upcoming running backs in the league. Spent a lot of years as a handcuff to Devonta Freeman in Atlanta. But then when he went to San Francisco, his production has dipped the last few years. And a lot of that is because of the system that Mike Shanahan ran there. He runs a lot of running back committees. So because of that, his production dipped a little bit in 2019. And then last year he battled injuries, only played in 8 games, and only had 28 attempts for 53 yards. That is not very good at all. It's likely why he's not on the 49ers anymore. But all that being said, I'm cautious about whether or not this guy has already hit his peak, for lack of better words. He's 28 years old. He's got a couple years of mileage in the league. And running back lifespans are really not that long. Unless you're a guy like Adrian Peterson or Frank Gore, who's an exception to that, a lot of these running backs tend to start wearing down at age 26, 27. So unless they're one of the elite running backs. But Tevin Coleman doesn't fall into that category. Very cautious about him going into the season. I would only consider him maybe if you're going to draft him in week 1 against Carolina's porous defense and then try to see if you can trade him. There could be some value in doing that, but I think after week 1, that's literally going to be his highest value all season. Next, you have Ty Johnson, a running back who's bounced around a little bit the last 2 seasons. He was in Detroit, and then he went to the Jets last year. He's had some good games from time to time, but he doesn't really present a level of upside that people thought he could have. So a lot of that is going to the rookie that they drafted in the second round, who I'm going to get to in a sec, Michael Carter. So But anyway, Ty Johnson, I think that I could see a situation where he could be a decent early down back, but I have a hard time seeing him breaking through enough to really be a consistent starter for you, unless you're just need a plug and play at flex if you're desperate. And then, speaking of which, we will move to Michael Carter now, the rookie out of North Carolina, who was drafted in the second round of the draft. So he was drafted in the fourth round. I apologize for that. But he projects to be kind of a PPR back, somebody that's pretty good at kind of operating in the open field. Mostly was in a timeshare in North Carolina with him and Javonte Williams, who were both kind of a 1-2 punch. Javonte Williams was more physical. Carter was more of a speed guy who can kind of get around the corner. However, in reading his report about how he's projecting he'll be at the next level, there's some things that are concerning to me about having a difficult feel for gauging blocking schemes, having the top end speed that would translate to the NFL level, for example. So things like that are a little concerning to me because I don't think the Jets are going to have a very good line. And we've seen guys in the past that are supposedly really quick and can get around tackles like Le'Veon Bell. When he went there, he struggled to break out at all, and he ended up being a bust with the Jets. So I know that was a couple years ago, and you can't necessarily gauge the past. But if Le'Veon Bell had trouble with the New York Jets linemen in terms of getting open, this is one of the best running backs in the league. I have a hard time seeing Michael Carter being somebody who could break out on this team. That being said, of all these running backs, he's the one that I like the most because of the upside that he could provide. But I'm not as high on him as some of these other rookie running backs because I think that a lot of this is going to be hindered by the team. They haven't had an elite fantasy running back in the Jets system for quite a while. So it's going to really take a lot for me to imagine Michael Carter kind of being that guy. And then other guys of note on the Jets, Michael Perine is another guy who I believe he was a rookie last year. They felt that maybe he could be the guy to step up, but he really didn't play particularly well. He was another guy that struggled with blocking schemes and getting open. Now he's fourth on the depth chart, so have a hard time seeing him getting the involvement either. We now move to receivers. So the receivers are interesting to me with the Jets because a lot of this is going to depend on who Zach Wilson preferences. But there's a lot of guys that have potential to do really well, but I could also see them kind of being a bust. So that being said, I'm not particularly high on any of these guys, but I'm still going to run through a projection of them. So the wide receiver one on this team right now is Corey Davis. He was signed from Tennessee. Corey Davis, for the most part, has been relatively disappointing in his career. He was, believe it or not, the number 5 overall pick in his draft. However, with Tennessee, he was inconsistent for quite a while. Last season was his best season of the ones that he had. He did have a couple games in which he had double-digit receptions or triple-digit yards. Had a couple touchdowns in there. So he had almost 1,000 receiving yards in the season and 65 receptions. So he did have some decent value, but he also really was pretty unpredictable from time to time. He had 2 games in which he didn't even catch a pass. He had other games in which he only had 3 receptions. So a lot of his production was relatively touchdown dependent. So going from a system like Tennessee where they have a very good offense between the play action pass with Derrick Henry, other options like A.J. Brown who can get open for them, to the New York team in which they're pretty much going to be locking in on Corey Davis as their receiving option, I'm a little skeptical about how he's going to do. That being said, if Zach Wilson is excellent, I could see Corey Davis reaping a lot of benefits from that, but I also have a hard time seeing him really breaking out as much as we would hope for. Other guys that they have, Jamison Crowder has been around the league for quite a while. I believe this is his 3rd season on the Jets. He is a flex guy that you can plug and play as a stream option, and really not too much more than that. He's the classic example of somebody that is you draft out of modest production who you can just use as a stream, but he's not going to win you championships. So personally, a guy like that, I would rather just not draft at all, unless the only way I would be interested in him is if he happens to be on waivers and I'm really desperate to get a flex receiver in there, or if he's got a good matchup where I think that he could be flipped for more value after that week. But other than that, I'm not really interested in Jamison Crowder that much, although he could be the most consistent of these receivers. Denzel Mims, I am probably the most high on among these receivers. He is a guy that his second year in the league, he kind of struggled in his rookie year. A lot of that was because of the offensive play and Adam Gase just not being a good coach. But there's a chance that a lot of times rookie receivers kind of struggle in their first season, and then their second year is really when they start to break out. I could kind of see something like that happening with Denzel Mims. He's certainly talented enough to do that, but he's got quite a bit of room to go in order to really be a guy that I could count on. But that being said, of the receivers that are there, he's probably one of the ones that I like the most. They also signed Keelan Cole from Jacksonville. He's a veteran that's been around for a little while who has some value, maybe as they're starting the season, just because he could adapt to the offense. But as of now, I'm not particularly high on him. Elijah Moore, a rookie that they drafted out of Ole Miss, has interest to me because, again, you're talking about filling a void, and you want to go with these guys who have potential to really step up as an elite receiver like Elijah Moore, just because we simply don't know what his value is at this time. Maybe he could be a guy that can step up and on a team that really needs consistency at the receiver position. But he's probably not going to get drafted, but still somebody to keep an eye on waivers depending on how the season develops for them. So we now move to the tight end position, and this guy has literally been one of the most hyped players that have done absolutely nothing through his career. His name is Chris Herndon. This guy has had anything happen to him from injuries to Sam Darnold getting mono to just not catching a pass to having a game where he looks like he's going to be a good tight end. But this guy's literally has been hyped for the amount of production that he's actually put up in the league. This guy is consistently overhyped and is always hurt. In fact, he's listed on the depth chart currently as being hurt. So it's just don't even anytime anybody ever says anything about oh, this is Chris Herndon's year, I just basically just tune it out because I just know that that's never going to happen. So just don't consider Chris Herndon at all. Tyler Kroft, he's another guy that he had some good years in the past with the Bengals, and I think even now that hurts Herndon even more because Kroft, I think, has honestly been a better NFL player throughout his career than Chris Herndon has. That being said, I don't really like either of them as reliable tight ends, but we'll see what Zach Wilson prefers. I just see Zach Wilson more as a guy that's going to rely on his receivers than a guy that's really going to be dumping it off to his tight end. Jets defense, this is basically a no. They do have some players that have made the defense better over the years, but I don't really see the Jets being a defense that you can rely upon consistently. And the reason being is because their secondary is not going to generate the turnovers to justify taking them. And then their place kicker is Sam Ficken, who was a backup for the Rams for quite a while. I really don't have a ton of interest in him or really too much to say other than sometimes these teams like this that they have a good enough offense to get by, put the kicker in field goal range, but they struggle in the red zone and they generally don't win games. These tend to be the kickers that do really well. So Sam Ficken could be a guy that actually puts up a pretty good season. But we have to wait and see because this is a guy who's not going to get drafted. He's almost certainly going to be on waivers. So if he has a good week, maybe Carolina, a team that's not a very good defense, he could start off with a good week one. Maybe you could consider him as a stream that week. But I don't have too much to say other than we'll just see how the season develops with him. Could see it going either way. Could see him doing well, but also could see him not doing well. But that's all I got on this video. Once again, if you're interested in more videos like this, please check out my channel. I make fantasy football videos, but I also cover songs. I also react to songs too, and I also do some other stuff from time to time. So if you're interested in stuff like that, check out my channel, and hopefully you enjoy it. All right, well, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.